So this is about Nobel Awards. In October, usually every year there will be certain Nobel Awards that will be issued. So as such, we don't need to remember who got these Nobel Awards because that is static question. That is not at all important. But it is a concept, like for what they were awarded this Nobel Prize. That concept is very important. And you also need to understand how that concept works. And third thing, whenever there is a Nobel Prize, you also need to see if there is any, like for example, Nobel Prize was awarded for a new development, then you have to see the existing development on which this new development came. So UPSC usually focuses on these areas: the concept, the new development, and the existing development. These three, if you can remember, it will be beneficial. Why I'm saying this is, for example, there was an Nobel Prize awarded for some mRNA, and immediately there was a question in 2019 about mRNA technology. Similarly on CRISPR. So these are the kind of science and technology questions. So their inspiration usually comes from these kind of discoveries. Okay. So coming back to this, consider the following statements with respect to recent Nobel Award in chemistry in 2019. So first one, it was awarded for the development of lithium ion batteries as an alternative to fossil fuels. Second thing, in a discharge mode of battery, the anode gains electrons and cathode loses electrons. But in charging mode, the reverse happens. Third thing, the main reason for success of lithium ion batteries is due to its high energy density property. So if you are done, then we'll disclose the answer here. So the first thing here, even if you don't know like what it has been awarded and all, at least you should have had basic physical idea of how a battery works. And always remember, anode is a like a negative electrode from where electron is lost. It is not gained. So from anode, whenever anode loses an electron, usually in the discharge mode I'm talking first. So in the discharge mode, basically from the anode, an electron goes to the cathode. So whenever electron moves, electricity or current passes. So that is how this current is passed from the battery. So anode loses electron and cathode gains electron. So that is in discharge. And in the charge, the reverse happens because anode again had to get the electrons, so that in discharging it can lose and generate the current. So that is why the second statement here is, so second statement is a basic fact. So if you know this, then you would have got the answer correct here. So the answer is 1 and 3, that is D. Yeah, so answer is D. So now we'll go for this, like what happened and all in the 2019. So this is about that. So if you can see here, this is the anode, this is the negative sign, and cathode positive. So usually the anode is made up of petroleum coke with lithium ions. Okay, it is not completely lithium. And this ion, we say ion because it has lithium ions, and ions are the most mobile particles. So the ions move easily and generate more electricity and will be stored in less amount of space. That is why lithium ion is used in petroleum coke at the anode side, and on the other side it will be the cobalt oxide. So that is how it forms a lithium ion battery. And these are the three scientists who got this. Like if you see, first time they've used titanium disulfide as cathode and lithium as an anode, and then in 1980 they improved it. They improved the cathode, changed the cathode to cobalt oxide, and finally now what we have is petroleum coke where lithium ions are infused, and on the cathode side we have cobalt oxide. That is why we also talk these rare earth metals, like in the Latin America we have this lithium ion, lithium, cobalt and all, from where we can extract and manufacture. So that is about lithium ion battery. And the main thing about lithium ion is like classical battery, basically the principle is redox, that is reduction and oxidation operation happens. Okay, so reduction means gain of electrons. Okay, oxidation means loss of electrons. So that results in electricity. And in discharge mode, as I said, anode loses electron and cathode gains the electron. Whereas in the opposite, whereas in the recharge, the opposite happens. And finally, anode is made of material which readily loses electron, and cathode is made of material that can accept, absorb the electrons. So currently, lithium cobalt oxide is cathode, and carbon in the form of graphite is anode. So this is current one. Now, what are the advantages? Why we use lithium ion? This is also very important to know, because if we know this, then only you can appreciate this advantage over classical batteries. First thing is high energy density. Like a small laptop battery right now, which is lithium ion, can store more energy than a 6 kg conventional battery. So you are understanding, right? So it can store so much of energy in less space. So that is high energy density. That's how it is advantageous, and that's how smartphones, laptop, all these tab sizes have reduced because of that battery. And second important advantage is minimum loss. So it loses only 5% of its charge per month, because this is how the cycle of battery is maintained. If it is a traditional battery, it usually loses 20%, and that is why you need to recharge those batteries, like which are available in the bikes and cars. So that is how the minimum loss is also an advantage for lithium ion. And then finally, low maintenance. Like it lasts for hundreds of charges, so that is why low maintenance. And as I said, it stores more energy in less space, the weight is also less. That is why right now we are looking for all the electric vehicles technology to use lithium ion batteries. And also how it will become an alternative to fossil fuels, it becomes when we are storing this solar energy or renewable energy in lithium ion batteries. So we store them in the night time and then we can use, or we can store that energy and then can use whenever we need. So that's how we are planning to make lithium ion work as an alternative to fossil fuels. Okay. And finally, what India has done is recently ISRO launched an technology transfer package. Basically, ISRO uses this lithium ion batteries in the satellites, so that it is now transferring it to the private industries. And these metals, the minerals, raw minerals, are basically lithium, cobalt, nickel, and manganese. These four are very important raw materials, and these are mainly procured from China, Bolivia, and Chile. So these are the three countries from where they are procured mainly. So we have a dependency on this, so that is one again challenge. So that is about lithium ion battery. So now we will see, yes, the second thing. So this is about movements, guys. Like in 2018 and 19, there were number of movements that happened all across the world, and this is how usually UPSC asks. Like in international events, if there are any events, they will match it with where it is occurring, either city or the country. So I also try to frame the question in that format so that you will get an idea. So now consider the following pairs of countries and movements that happened. So France, associated with Extinction Rebellion. Second one, United Kingdom, Yellow Vest movement. Third one, Sweden, Friday for Future movement. Hong Kong, Umbrella movement. So now mark the option. We will disclose it. Okay. So if you are done with the guessing, guys, also if you don't even know the answer, even then try use some logic, or even by guesswork also try to make a guess. Okay. Try to mark an answer even if you don't know that question. So try to make that habit. You never know, so that will be helpful in the final exam also. So now the answer here is D, 3 and 4. So the simple reason is first and 2 have interchanged. Basically, Extinction Rebellion happened in Britain, United Kingdom, in London, and this rocked the entire London city. Like for few days London was completely closed because of this protest. We'll discuss that in detail. And then Yellow Vest movement actually happened in France. That also was a very significant protest that went on for months. Okay. And umbrella movement is related to 2014 actually. Now right now there are protests happening in Hong Kong, right? The earlier protests, the first stage of protest started in 2014. Those protests they called as umbrella movement, because they used umbrellas to protect themselves against pepper sprays. That is why the umbrella name came. Okay. And Sweden, you all know Greta Thunberg. Okay. She's a young teenager who is fighting for the climate change. So basically what she said is, we will call off Fridays, like we will not go to school on Fridays. Instead we will sit on agitation for actions on climate change. So that happened in Sweden, that started in Sweden. So 3 and 4 are correct. So now we will see in detail about these movements, because these are very important, not only from prelims but even from mains also important. You might get a question on these kind of social movements. They might ask what are the transnational movements going on in the world. So kind of questions like this. So if you see the first one, Extinction Rebellion is a civil society campaign, and the important unique feature is it uses a strategy called non-violent civil disobedience. This is very very much kind of connect we have with India, especially Gandhi's strategy of civil disobedience. So what does that mean? That means they'll not involve in violence, but they will disobey all the laws of the government. So that is how they will campaign. So basically It was established in 2018 in Britain, and in this, all the academics have come up and started an awareness about the environment, especially climate change. And what their objective is, like they want radical change. They don't want any incremental change. They want complete change in the government policies to save the human extinction, to save the risk of human extinction, and to prevent the ecological collapse. So there are three demands made by them. So what are they? First one is, the government, especially the Britain government, must tell the truth by declaring climate and ecological emergency. So that is climate emergency. Government has to declare that there is a climate emergency. So by declaring it, people will also get more awareness and people will act. So that is the radical change. Second thing, government must act immediately and to stop greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2025. This is very ambitious target, because even right now, after these agitations, Britain finally agreed that they will go for net zero by 2050, not 2025. That is by 25 years ahead, after like 25 years delay. So that is the ambitious target they have asked for. And third thing, they want to create an citizens assembly. So like how Gandhi propagated Gram Swarajya, they want some citizens assembly, and they will decide what to do in the decisions about climate change. So these are the main three demands. And finally, Britain agreed for two of the demands. One, they have, yes, declared the climate emergency. Second thing, they made that the climate change, they said that we will go climate greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. So this is the success of that movement. So this basically happened in and around London, and mainly in Britain. So this is Extinction Rebellion. Now we'll see the next one, Yellow Vest Movement. So Yellow Vest Movement is basically, the name came because they use the jackets, yellow jackets. These are the jackets that are mandated by French government, for every drivers in lorries and cars, to store them, so that whenever they get off on night, they will be visible for the highway drivers, so that the accidents will be less. But now they have used this as a symbol of protest against the taxes imposed, or fuel prices that were hiked by French government. So that is how it started. So initially it started because of increase of taxes on the fuel, and then it went into kind of increase the minimum wages for the people, and then all the middle class joined, saying that the middle class are not benefiting from the economic development of France. So that's how it came in. And then finally, France government has to come down and then say that no, we are not going to have any tax hike on fuels for the next 6 months. And also it said we will not impose any greater taxes. So that's how those were the success of Yellow Vest movement. And then Fridays for Future movement. This, as I said, it is a movement by Greta Thunberg that started in 2018 in Sweden, and slowly it spread to all the countries. Like even in India also, there were many school students who have participated in it. As I said, it is like more than 1 million young people from all over the world have participated from 100 countries. And she was honored with Amnesty International Ambassador for Conscience Award. This is not important, but this is what happened. And then finally, we'll see Hong Kong protests in detail. So, like in 2014 September, what happened is, basically the government, China, what it did is it passed certain laws restricting the, or making new electoral changes for the Hong Kong Legislative Assembly. So basically, they restricted who can be elected, and China control was there, like who can be nominated. If China chooses some people, and then Hong Kong people have to vote for them only. So this is a kind of law they have passed. So to protest against it, the umbrella movement started. Okay, and it was started in 2014, and it was about 80 days, 79 days. And the umbrella name came because it was used as defense against police pepper spray. And then a brief history, like what about Hong Kong? Hong Kong is basically a British colony. Okay, remember, like it was handed over back to China in 1997 under one country, two systems principle. Okay, under this, Chinese Communist government will respect the Hong Kong's own currency, legal and parliamentary systems. Like they will have unique freedoms which are not available in the China. But in 2014, as I said, they have brought a new framework for the election reforms, which limited the rights to vote and elected. So that's how the protest started. And then again, if you see in 2019 June, there were again protests started. This time, why? because again China brought a new law saying that people from Hong Kong can be extradited to mainland China, and these were even more violent. So again in June 2020, like 1 month back, China said to control such kind of protests, we are passing a new law called National Security Law. So this is the latest one. So according to this, anyone who involves in any activity like sedition, subversion, or even if they say something against China, even if they are foreigners, they will be prosecuted under this act in Hong Kong. This is the latest law of national security law. That is why right now there are so much tensions, like US imposing sanctions. Britain responded by saying that we will take Hong Kong people by giving them citizenship. Even Australia said we will give them. Some people, some companies have trying to go away from Hong Kong. So this is a kind of latest development that is going on. So that is why Hong Kong is also very important from both prelims and mains point of view for this year. So now having discussed that, there were other few revolutions that you have to also study. That is Jasmine Revolution. So Jasmine Revolution is nothing but Arab Spring. If you know that Arab Spring, it started in Tunisia. Okay, it started in somewhere in 2011 that time. So it is basically to remove all the Arab monarchies and they want to transform them into democracies. So that's how they started, and then Arab Spring finally slowly faded away after few years. It was successful in Tunisia and some other areas, and then it brought a new conflict in Syria. Like right now what we have Syrian crisis has its roots in Arab Spring. So that is that. And then Kurdish problem is also very important this year. So you need to know where the Kurdish people live. Like they live in four countries, like around Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and then you have some parts of Syria. So this is the area where Kurdish people live. So you need to know why these people doesn't have a country. There is a treaty after World War One, so you need to know that treaty. And then what are the important towns in Kurdish area, because UPSC might ask this also, like this town, this tribe, this town or this act with this tribe. So that way they might match. So try to see in a map and see this Kurdish problem in which areas and all, because this was in news because Turkey attacked Kurdish areas in Syria. So that is why it was important. Now we'll go for the next topic. So this is again from internal security aspect of India. This is very important. There were a couple of important peace accords that were signed in Northeast with the government of India. So I have mentioned three of them. So we will first see the question. Like consider the following statements with respect to the recent peace accords signed in Northeast area. First one, Naga Peace Framework Agreement involves insurgent groups recognizing Indian political system and governance, and India recognizing Indian, sorry, this is a repeat of statement. India recognizing their sentiments and aspirations is correct one. Like India recognizing Naga sentiments and aspirations. So that is a question. So that is a statement. Like this peace accord mainly involves, I'll explain this. Naga Peace Accord framework involves Naga people or Naga agitators, insurgents, basically respecting the Indian political system, Indian constitution and governance, and India in turn respecting their unique identity, culture, and aspirations. Okay. Second thing, Bodo Peace Accord 2019 is the first ever accord that is claimed to end separate Bodoland demand in Meghalaya. Okay. Second one. Third one, Bru Settlement Agreement gives the Bru refugee community their choice of living in either the state of Tripura or Mizoram. So this is a bit a tricky question, and there are few traps also for here. So try to read once again. So the answer is D here, 1 and 3. Basically second one is wrong. So why second one is wrong, I will explain. So simple fact, if you know that Bodoland is a demand that is happening in Assam, you'll straight away eliminate this, because what I mentioned here, it is Meghalaya. So that is first wrong, first trap. And there is another trap here also, like that is, I'm saying it as a first ever accord. So that is also wrong, because Bodoland is such an like historical demand that is going on right from 1970 80s. So how do you think like it will be the first time? So that is why it is a third accord actually. So there are two traps, two false statements. So that way you can eliminate two. So if you eliminate two, then it is 1 and 3. And it is true. This Bru refugees actually came from Mizoram to Tripura. So now government is trying to resettle them according to their choice. Either they can go back to Mizoram or they can settle even in Tripura. So that is this 1 and 3. So now we'll see this in detail, like what is Nagas, what is this issue, why the Naga peace accord and all in detail, because this is very important from even national security and internal security dimension, like GS paper 3. Okay. So first thing, Nagas. So what is the key demand? The key demand of Nagas is basically Greater Nagalim. Okay, and this Greater Nagalim is not just in India itself. This extends even to the Myanmar. Like they want certain territories on the border of Myanmar and the territories of Nagaland and Mizoram and certain areas of Assam. So all of this they want as an greater state or greater nation called Greater Nagalim. This is their only important demand they have started with. Okay, and yes, as I said, it includes Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Assam, and Myanmar. And also they want separate constitution and separate flag. So this is something not acceptable for Indian government, union government. This is where the conflict came. And then why they want separate when all the other states like Assam, Meghalaya are able to accept Indian constitution? This is because Nagas are basically not just a single tribe. They are multiple tribes. Okay, there are very different tribes and there were clashes among the tribes also, and they belong to Indo-Mongolian family. Okay, and these people, uh, they established themselves as unique, and they say they had little connect with the contact with the rest of the people from the ancient times. So even when British annexed Assam in 1826, they created separate district called Naga Hills district, and they gave full autonomy for them because they know that they can't conquer complete tribal people. So that's how they gave the first autonomy. And when independence came to India in 1947, Nagaland formed a Naga National Council. Okay, and they said we will not join India, but instead we will remain independent. And they said, even they conducted a referendum and said, from now we are going to be an independent Naga state. But India didn't accept it, and India started the taking action on Nagaland or Naga National Council. That's how Naga National Council became an insurgent group. And finally, in 1975, this was split into two factions. One is NSCN IM and NSCN Kaplang. So NSCN stands here for National Socialist Council of Nagaland, and IM stands for Izavik Muvia. Okay, Izavik Muvia. This is the name of a leader. So there were two leaders, Izak Muvia, two leaders, and Kaplang, third leader. So two leaders formed a faction called NSCN IM, and NSCN Kaplang is another faction. Right now, this peace accord, the current peace accord is between Indian government and NSCN IM. Okay, so that is important thing you have to note. And now, what are the peace accords that we tried? One is Schilling Accord in 1975, and then ceasefire agreement in 1997, and then finally in 2015 we had this framework agreement. So that is how we started. We said we will start peace negotiations from 2015 based on two principles, as we have already discussed. That is, Naga people respecting the Indian political system and governance, and Indian government respecting the uniqueness, aspirations, and sensitivities of Nagaland people. And then finally in 2017 we made a major breakthrough by where the ceasefire was agreed, and all the Naga armed outfits, at least major of them, were joined the talks and they have surrendered their arms. And very recently, there was a new development, that is, the state government of Nagaland started register of indigenous inhabitants of Nagaland on the lines of this NRC in Assam. Like how NRC happened in Assam, they also want to have a record of who are the actual indigenous inhabitants of Nagaland. That way, they can provide more benefits to their people. So that's why they made this decision. So that is the latest development. So that is about Naga issue. Now we'll see Bodoland. So Bodoland, basically the context is like recently in 2019 in October, the Ministry of Home Affairs, Assam government and Bodo groups, these three made a tripartite agreement saying that we will rename and change the or give more autonomy to Bodoland Territorial Area District. So if you remember, day before yesterday, we discussed 6 schedule areas. Under that, I said in Assam there are three. One of them is Bodoland Territorial Autonomous Council or Bodoland Territorial District Council. So that is a 6 schedule area where Bodoland people will have more autonomy. Now this third Bodo Accord actually gives them even more autonomy and tries to solve this problem permanently. So we will see the provisions, like how it came and what are the new provisions of this latest accord. Okay. So as I said, this Bodos are single largest community in notified scheduled tribes. Okay, in Assam, in entire Assam, already there are less number of tribes. In that, Bodos are the largest one, and they contribute to about 5 to 6% of Assam population. Okay, and this demand started in way back in 67-68 when there was separate demand for Assam against illegal immigrants. And then finally, in 1993, the first Bodo Accord was signed. See, okay, 1993, first one, and second one was signed to give the Bodo areas separate autonomy. And finally, in 2003, according to the second Bodo Accord, we have passed this sixth schedule and we have given them autonomy. But this was also, there was certain concerns about this sixth schedule also, saying that like governor has more power in this, and governor has to sign each law passed by this autonomous council. So it is kind of restricting their power, political power. So again, there were kind of frictions, there kind of agitations and armed insurgencies happening. So to solve it finally to permanently, very recently in 2019, central government, Assam state government, and these groups came together for a new accord called Third Bodo Accord. So according to this, first provision is they will rename this Bodoland Territorial Area District to Bodoland Territorial Region. No more district. So certain kind of region they will give. And the second thing is it gives more legislative, executive, and administrative autonomy. Like under sixth schedule itself, they will expand their autonomy. So Assam state government power will be reduced, and these Bodoland Territorial Council will be given more power, like expanding the elected members. There is no need of having explicit consent for many laws from the governor. So these kind of provisions will be provided. And also government Assam will notify Bodoland as the one of the associated official language. So they will recognize them as official language. And also, if there are any non-heinous crime cases against these insurgent groups, that will also be dropped so that they can be brought to mainstream. And finally, a development package of 1500 crores was promised to them. Okay. And a second council called Bodo Kachari Autonomous Council will be established to actually give more autonomy for certain tribes inside the Bodoland. Like there are certain tribes inside the Bodoland fighting for more power or more autonomy. So for them, there will be separate council will be created. So this is a kind of provisions that are provided in latest accord. And now Bru settlement. So the basic problem with Bru is like Bru are they are also called as Riang tribe. So these tribes are basically found in Tripura, Mizoram, and Assam. All these three are connected. Okay, and in 1997 there was a very famous ethnic clash that happened between Brus and certain population of Mizoram. Okay, so from Mizoram, many people had to flee and become refugees in their own country. So they fled from Mizoram to Tripura in 1997. From then, they are hosted in camps in Tripura. So like they don't have permanent houses, permanent property, or even jobs. So actually, to rehabilitate them or to send them back to Mizoram if they want to, or to settle them if they like to live in Tripura itself, government came up with a new agreement between again three people. One is central government, second Tripura government, third Mizoram government. So three parties have agreed, and they have given separate packages for them, and also they are giving land and jobs and even certain amount for them to establish their lives in Tripura itself. This is Bru settlement, because this is also one of the long-standing issue. And if you see, one important fact you have to remember is in Tripura, Bru or young tribals are recognized as particularly vulnerable tribal group. This is an important fact. So this is a kind of statement UPSC picks up and asks. So this you remember, okay? And this refugee crisis happened from Mizoram to Tripura. This is also important. So that is about Bru settlement agreement. Why this is in news is because already regarding the direct taxations, if you remember, we discussed minimum alternate tax and various concept in corporate taxes and all, right? Apart from that, in October, there were few reports that came in where MNCs were evading taxes by using certain methods, and this became a huge controversy. So certain international NGOs also suggested a unique method to stop this tax evasion. That is why this was in news. So, and also India made certain agreements to try to stop this. So that is why this was in news, and I framed a question about it, and we'll discuss the terms in detail. So now coming back to the question, consider the following statements with respect to different tools being used by MNCs to evade taxes. First one, base erosion and profit shifting term commonly in news refers to erosion of base income of MNCs to shift profits to their mother country. Second one, country by country report is a template for multinational enterprises to report annually and for each tax jurisdiction in which they do business to fight tax evasion. Third thing, round tripping, while refers to capital of same country being round tripped to itself via tax haven, treaty shopping instead involves routing foreign company capital to target country via tax haven. I know this is kind of very lengthy and it takes a lot of time to even digest that definition or understand. So try to read once again. But these are also kind of questions UPSC asks nowadays, because they go for definitions, they go for concepts, and they will give lengthy statements. That is how UPSC is nowadays trying to kill the time of aspirants. They don't want you people to solve like 100 questions and have some time. They want you to go through that rush, that stress. So that is why I've also given this question in that format. So now try to read that once again and mark the answer. Then I will tell you the solution for this, answer for this. So if you're done, okay. So here basically, if you know this base erosion and profit shifting concept, you can mark, or you would already know that first statement is wrong. Why? Because here two terms, base erosion and profit shifting. Okay, base erosion means you are eroding the base. Okay, what is the base? It is not the base of the MNC, it is the tax base of a country. So if you are working in a country, like for example Google is a company which is working in India. So instead of paying the taxes in India for the incomes that generated, it is actually paying it in US or some other country where the taxes are less. So that way what it is doing, it is eroding the base of Indian tax base. So basically it is eroding base. And profit shifting, profit shifting of whose? Of that company. So this is how you can remember. So that is why first statement is wrong. It is eroding the base of host country and shifting the profits to the tax haven or its home country. So first one is wrong. Second one is correct, because country by country report, this is a new kind of agreement that was made by India with the US. According to this, what happens is, for example, let's say Google, similarly, Google has a company in US and also in India. So now Google has to, for example, Google has to pay tax in India and also in US. So now to calculate the tax, they have to show the profits, right? So instead of Google India company preparing all the tax sheet and then Google US company preparing the tax sheet, like to reduce that compliance, what we are doing is, if it submits the tax report to US can share the same document with India, and Indian company don't need to prepare another additional document. This way we are reducing the compliance. So when you reduce the compliance, ease of doing business gets improved, FDI increases. So that is a new form of making the business, ease of doing business in India. So that is the second one. Second one is correct. Third thing, so these are the two tools, round tripping and treaty shopping. These are the two major tools used by international companies, especially MNC companies, to evade the tax. So how they are doing? Round tripping. As I said, round tripping, that is Indian company itself, instead of directly investing in India, it will go to lower tax jurisdiction like Mauritius, establishes a shell company there, and then puts the invest from that shell company to India. So what it is doing, Indian capital itself going to other country, and from then again routing to India. That is round trip. So that is why third one is also correct, because the same capital of the country is being again routed back to the same country. Whereas treaty shopping is just the same thing, but foreign country targeting to other country through a tax haven. For example, UK Vodafone is there. What Vodafone basically did is, Vodafone established a shell company in Cayman Islands, and from there it invested in India. So this is treaty shopping. So you're doing the shopping through another country. So that is the difference. So you need to know this difference also. So 1 and 3 are correct. Sorry, 2 and 3 are correct. First one is wrong. Okay. I'm really sorry here. Like, which of the above statements are correct should be the statement. It's not incorrect. So if it is incorrect, then it is one only is the answer. Okay. So here the statement is 2 and 3. So now we'll go with the different explanations, like different concepts in this. So this was in news because, as I said, country to country, country by country report agreement we signed with USA. Second thing, there was an international organization called Independent Commissions for Reform of International Corporate Taxation that proposed unitary tax on MNCs. So what is this unitary tax? They said instead of Google paying separate tax in US, separate tax in India, and evading the taxes, to avoid that evasion, we will impose a one tax in the entire world for Google, and then based on its operations, its incomes and employees, they will again distribute this tax to those countries. So that is a kind of proposal they brought in to stop this tax evasion. So that is why it was in news. So base erosion and profit shifting, same thing we discussed already, so I will not touch it again. Okay. Second thing, double tax avoidance agreement. So this base erosion and profit shifting by MNCs is happening through four tools basically. First one is double tax avoidance agreement. So what is this is basically, as I said, same example, like if Google is already in US and Google is in India, instead of Google paying same tax, same or double tax in India once and again in US for the same income generated, to stop that, the countries have come to an agreement called double tax avoidance. So if you pay one tax, then you don't need to pay the other tax. Usually it is where the taxpayer resides. If the taxpayer resides in that country, and then sorry, wherever he earns the income, there it only will be taxed according to this agreement. And India has these agreements with around 80 countries, and majorly we had it with Mauritius, Singapore and Cayman countries. This is where we have the problem. That is why I mentioned this Mauritius and Cayman, because what's happening is in Mauritius and Cayman the tax rates are very low. Okay, these are called as tax havens. So now MNC companies are utilizing this agreement which India has with them, and then routing the investment, that is FDI investment, through this island countries. So they will have to pay less tax and they can evade the taxes in India. So that is one tool. Okay. So now that tool we have discussed. Second thing, round tripping. This I have already discussed. Indian companies investing in India but through another country to evade the taxes. And then transfer mispricing. So this is important again. So what is this transfer pricing? First of all, transfer pricing is like if Alphabet is a parent company of Google and Google is a subsidiary company of Alphabet, and these are two companies related to one. Okay. Now, whatever the business Google does, it also sells certain products back to its parent company. Let's say, for example, Microsoft is there in US and Microsoft R&D center is there in Hyderabad. So if any R&D product that is generated in Hyderabad, it will ship it back to US parent company. So when it ships back, this price is called transfer pricing. Okay. Now companies are using this as a tool to evade the taxes. How? So for example, to export a service from Hyderabad to parent company Microsoft, let's say if it is actually charged like $5,000, it instead quotes the price as $25,000. So it increases the price. So that way it says the operational expenses have increased for Hyderabad company. So we can't have any income. So we will not be able to pay taxes. So that's how they are evading the taxes. This is called transfer mispricing. So you are misquoting the price of transfer. That is transfer mispricing. And then treaty shopping we discussed, like how foreign company uses a tax haven to target to another country. So these are the different tools, four tools: DTAA, round tripping, transfer mispricing, and treaty shopping. So remember these concepts like basic understanding so that you will be able to identify the options if at all given. And now what are the counters? The counter is basically OECD BEPS project. So OECD is a group of countries, basically developed countries of Europe and US. So they came together and they said they proposed a 15-point action plan in like on the recommendations of G20 to improve the transparency, like companies disclosure, companies fairly giving all the details, so that that can be used to avoid the tax evasions. And similarly, this BEPTS also launched a report called country by country report, as I said, like where they have to disclose what they are paying in other country. So if you have agreement with US, then US will share you the report, like what Google parent company in US has shared with the US tax authorities. That way you will know if they are evading anything. Okay, so that is about different tools of uh, tax evasion and uh, counters. So now we will see randomized control trials. So this is again a concept inspired from Nobel Prize for Economics. Okay, and this is also like quite a news, because if you know Abhijit Banerjee, an Indian origin economist, and Esther Duflo, okay, his wife, and Kramer, Paul Kramer, these three got Nobel Prize in Economics for a unique concept. Like they have developed a unique method to actually uh, fight against poverty. Okay, so having discussed that, we'll see the question first. Consider the following statements with respect to randomized control trials. First one, 2019 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences awarded for the use of experimental approaches, or RCT, randomized control trials, to fight global poverty. This I've already told. So this is correct. Second one, an RCT is an experiment that is designed to isolate the influence that a certain intervention or variable has on the outcome or event. So second one. Third one, RCT tool has been traditionally used in biomedics like vaccine trials, drug research, etc., which is now extended to economics. Okay, so if you have already marked the answer, then we will go with the solution. So here, as I said, the first one is correct, and third one you might have already got a basic understanding, like by the definition randomized control trials, and because of corona vaccine and all, you would have already known that in all these vaccine in the human trials and all, this is the mechanism that is used. So they will randomly select certain people, and they will control the environment, like they will place them in the hospital, and then they will administer the vaccine, and then they will see like whether there is any effect, any side effects or anything. So this is the randomized control trials usually used in vaccines and drug research or drug developments. Now it is being used, the same method is being used to try different experiments in fighting the poverty, that is in economics. So that is why third statement is correct, and second statement is nothing but the definition of RCT. So second one is also correct. So all the three statements are correct here. So answer is D. Okay, now we'll see in detail about what is this RCT. So as I said, it is awarded to three scientists, Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, Paul Kramer, for using experimental approach. And what is this randomized control trials? This is also we have discussed, like basically what you do is, if you have a broader area and broader set of variables, then it will be very difficult for you to find which variable is affecting the outcome. But if you have controlled environment, like where you can control the experiment what you are conducting, then you can know precisely by changing what you can have an effect on the outcome. I will give a simple example in this, related to poverty. Like what these guys done is, they went to a school, okay, and instead of focusing what like various things that needs to be done to improve the children's learning outcomes, they simply did one test. Okay, so they want to know whether improving the strength of the teachers will increase the educational outcomes, or providing infrastructure, or providing more teachers. What is that that can improve? So to try that, they have tried one in each school, or one at a time. So they said we will try with increasing more teachers. So when they tried to improve more teachers, automatically the learning outcomes of the students have increased. So this way they came to a conclusion that increasing and teachers, number of teachers, by keeping all the other variables constant, you can actually improve the outcomes of learning. So this is a kind of RCT experiment. Okay, and yeah, so this is the same thing that we have already discussed. And similarly, this can be extended to malnutrition, like climate change, even economic and social status like poverty. You can know like whether you can transfer direct benefit transfers or not, because many people say if you give universal basic income to poor people, and poor people may end up actually spending that on liquor and other usages which will not be useful for them. So to understand whether they do it or not, they conduct these kind of experiments and they give them direct money, and then they will observe whether they are doing it for liquor or whether they are using it to send their children to schools. So based on the outcomes, then they will expand the program. So this is a kind of intervention to fight the poverty. So this is about RCT. This is one of the important concepts this year. So that's why you need to know that concept. Now the sixth question. So consider the following statements with respect to different aspects of hunger and malnutrition. First one, according to Global Hunger Index 2019, India is the best performer in South Asia subcontinent. Second thing, Global Hunger Index is published annually by International Food Policy Research Institute and UNESCO. Okay. Third one, while wasting refers to weight below the average for height, stunting refers to height below the average for their age. So now, if you know who releases, or at least what is the India's performance in this Global Hunger Index, then you would have already got the answer. So try to mark the answer. I will also disclose the solution for this. Okay, if you're done, the answer here is basically third one. Okay, rest of the first and two are wrong, and this is a trap. Especially the second one is trap, because till 2018, yes, it was this IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute, that released the Global Hunger Index. And no other organization related to UN or World Health Organization or any other organization releases it. It is a private institute. Okay, International Food Policy Research Institute releases this Global Hunger Index till 2018. But from 2018, there were new organizations that were releasing it, that have takeover. That we will discuss in the slide. So second one is wrong. And first one, if India is the top performer, we would have already got the government publishing it like anything. Like you would have all the media reports, you would have already known it. Okay, our government usually doesn't miss like this. Like if you know already ease of doing business or global innovation index and all, if we improve even 10 places, you would have already got information. So we are the actually worst performer in entire in South Asia subcontinent. Even Pakistan and Nepal are better than us. Okay, so that is why first one is wrong here, and that is why it is also important to know this index and the components on which it is measured. Okay, so now we'll see. I think, yeah, answer is already given. So now we'll see this in detail. So basically, it is an annual report that measures and tracks hunger at global, regional, and country levels. So three levels. Remember, this also very important: global, regional, and current country level. And it is basically to trigger action against SDG 2, that is zero hunger by 2030. So that is the objective of this report. And as I said, it used to be released by IFPRI, but from 2018, Welt Hunger Hilfe of Germany and Concern Worldwide are publishing. So remember this, these are the two, Concern Worldwide and Welt Hunger Life. Welt Hunger Hilfe is an German private organization, biggest one, and Concern Worldwide is an NGO that is fighting poverty. So these are the two. And India ranked 1 or 2 of 117 countries. Now you can imagine. And India has the lowest score of 30.3, placing it in severe hunger category. So there are like categories: severe, like some other status like very severe, and then poor. So these kind of categories, and we are at the top level, at the severe level. And India is the worst performer in child wasting indicator. And in entire subcontinent, if you see, Nepal 73, Sri Lanka 66, Bangladesh 88, Myanmar 69, Pakistan 94. So we are the one worst performer here. So that is why you have to remember. And these are the four parameters on which this score is like calculated. First one is undernourishment. So undernourishment basically refers to the share of population that is undernourished, that is whose caloric intake is insufficient, basically children and adults. So right now 14.5% of Indian population is undernourished. This kind of facts are very important for means. Like whenever you write an answer, you can quote this stat and you can write. Similarly, if you see child wasting, we already discussed that. Like any share of children under the age of 5 who are wasted, that is lower weight for their height. So always remember, wasting refers to less weight for their height, whereas stunting refers to less height for their age and weight. Okay. So similarly, in India, we have 20% as children are wasting, child wasting. And similarly, we have 38%, close to 38% as stunting. That is very less height. Okay. And finally, child mortality, the mortality rate of children under the age of 5 again. Okay. So these are the four parameters on which this report is generated. So these are the dimensions, just a videographic information. Like if you see, stunting and wasting forms under child undernutrition, and that is allocated 1 by 3rd weightage. And undernourishment is 1 by 3rd, and child mortality is 1 by 3rd. So these are the three, and these are the effects that happens because of this stunting and undernutrition and undernourishment. So undernutrition basically is like if you're not getting enough nutrition after like under age of 5, whereas nourishment is like uh, from childhood, like breastfeeding, everything covers under this nourishment. And then mortality, like infant mortality rate, all this comes under child mortality. So now the final topic, we'll just close with this. So this again came into news because this when there was a huge pollution in Delhi, and Environment Pollution Control Authority started or kick-started this graded response action plan during that time. So that's why this was in news. And the interesting thing about this EPCA is not an executive body formed by government. It is actually a body that was formed by Supreme Court on a PIL, and this PIL case is also very important. This case is usually quoted in GS2 answers also, like where where judiciary extends as a form of judicial overreach or judicial activism. So that is one of the example where Supreme Court, seeing the pollution PIL, constituted a authority called Environmental Pollution Control Authority under Environment Ministry under the Act, Environment Protection Act 1986. And this basically deals with Delhi. Okay, this main jurisdiction is Delhi NCR region, and it enforces usually graded response action plan. So what is this graded response action plan? So based on the grade, like based on the severity of the pollution, the response will be like if it is small, then the response will be different. It will be severe, then the response will be different. That will also will see, but this is a graded response action plan. And these are the some points, like it is about protecting and improving the quality of environment and controlling the pollution in NCR region. And the important thing is EPCA can take the cases sumoto. Like Supreme Court, it can take the cases sumoto and investigate, and then even award punishments also. Like it has certain powers, and its main jurisdiction is only with respect to NCR, not the entire region. For the entire country, it is CPCB, that is Central Pollution Control Board. So that also you have to remember, and it has the powers to of entry, inspection, search, and seizure. Now we'll see graded response action plan. So these are the four grades: severe, severe, very poor, moderate to poor. So if it is very severe or emergency kind of category, that is usually when PM 2.5 is above 300 micrograms and PM10 is about 500 micrograms. Then you will see like this odd even rules will come right in news and all. So that is when this starts. So like all the trucks that are being entry into Delhi will be stopped, and then construction will be stopped. Odd even scheme will be started, and task force to decide. This is very important. Remember this. Like when it is only emergency, then odd even scheme is started, and emergency is very normal in India. This is a thing happens every year in Delhi. So this is not actually emergency. This is normal. And then you have severe. That is when the next stage. So if it is when it is like PM 2.5 is about just 250, then you have like closing all the brick lanes, all the stone crushers, all the industries, and power generation should be only from natural gas, not from the coal, and encourage public transport. All this, and then you have next better stage, that is very poor. So in this stage, you will stop using diesel generation sets in the entire region, in the NCR region and in the surrounding states, and then you will increase the parking fee to decrease the vehicular pollution and all. And these are the other ones, like increase bus and metro services, apartment owners to discourage burning fires in winter. And then finally, the less category, that is moderate to poor. That is when it's just becoming worse. Then you impose fines on garbage burning, and then smaller measures like control or enforce, regulate the production in brick lanes, and then mechanized sweeping on roads. All these firecrackers and all will start in the first stage. So this is the severity level. Remember this, from down to up, that is from moderate to poor, it goes to emergency level, and the actions also will be correspondingly. And these actions, always remember, in Delhi it is EPCA, that is Environment Protection Control Authority, which is mandated by Supreme Court. This is very important to know. Whereas CPCB deals with rest of the country and some of the aspects of Delhi.